alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, everyone. Welcome to Canada Today Youth Edition. I'm your host, Mohammed Maxwell. Yes, my middle name is Maxwell. And today we've got a topic for you that you definitely don't want to miss. If this is the first time you're here, we want to welcome you with open arms. And the whole idea of this show is to tackle topics that are relevant to the youth. You see, we're all about the truth about youth. And topic, it's going to be a juicy one, that's for sure. It's all about what to do before you say I do. It's all about marriage. And you've probably heard this phrase before. It goes a little something like this. Marriage is like a fortress. Those who are out want to get in, and those who are in want to get out. I mean, not always, but you know how it is. It's one thing there, but it's always on everyone's mind in one way or another. So with us here today to dive into this conversation, we got two amazing guests with us here to kind of unravel and untangle this whole situation. So with us today, we have Brother Taha Ansari. Brother Taha, he's active role over the past decade within a wide variety of Islamic initiatives, like the head of marketing for Al Maghrib Institute, where he worked alongside the likes of Sheikh Mohammed Al Sharif and Sheikh Yasser Qadi. In his local area of Halton Peel, he was among the founding members of Tal Musalla in Brampton. He currently spends his time volunteering as a youth advisor for Al Kitab Mubin Institute. And fun fact about him, folks, is that he is an eligible bachelor. This is going to be good for you. Look at his head. Look at that smile on his face. Thank you so much for joining us, Taha, today. He's got a lot of insight for us that I think you're going to take a lot away from. With us here today also we have is Sister Maria. And Sister Maria Beg currently lives in Toronto, Ontario. She obtained a law degree at the University of Kent in England and is currently completing the law licensing process in Ontario, hoping to be qualified as a lawyer soon, inshallah. Prior to studying law, Maria was heavily involved with My Voice Canada. She has recently returned to the youth organization as an alumni and member of the advisory board. Thank you so much for joining us here today, Sister Maria, as well. It's going to be awesome to have your insights too and for today's discussion. So here we have these two all-stars to talk about marriage. Now, again, as I said before, marriage is a hot topic. Just to kind of get our feet wet, to kind of get things rolling along, it's always nice to hear our guests' stories. I think we all have our different story to tell. So let's go ladies first. Sister Maria, if you can kindly share with the viewers here today, what was your experience like when it comes to marriage? How did you find that magical moment and have that fairy tale marriage, So if you can kindly share, by all means, we'd love to hear your thoughts.
For sure. Jazakallah khair. Thank you for having me, first of all. I don't know if I would call it a magical moment or a fairy tale, but we can get into that a little bit later, the misconceptions of marriage. For myself, I guess you could say I started taking the idea of marriage seriously when I was an undergrad at McMaster. There were a lot of people around me who used to talk about the topic. I was involved in the MSA, and MSAs definitely, it's a hot topic there, as you said. Marriage is always a hot topic. And I actually ended up meeting my now spouse, alhamdulillah, when I was actually in law school. So in the middle of law school, summer before my last year, I was introduced to my now husband through family friends. And alhamdulillah, we've been married for about 2.5 years. So we met a few times, we had some conversations, we realized that, you know what, we are very similar when it comes to looking at the bigger picture in life and when it comes to the things that matter. And when we get into talking about, what to look for in a spouse, I'll explain, what it was that I was looking for and what I think people should focus on looking for realistically. So I kept it very realistic, I guess you could say. I wasn't necessarily a dreamer, but that's just me. And alhamdulillah, my spouse, my husband is the same way, very realistic, down to earth, and just very focused on finding a partner who would, both of us were very focused on finding a partner who would bring us closer to God, help strengthen one another, lift one another up. And so when we found each other, we thought, okay, let's get married. And the funny thing is, I was in law school, and that is a hectic time. So there were a few people who were kind of like, don't you want to wait till after you graduate? And I was in England too. I was completing law school in England. So they're like, at least come back across the pond. But because I'd been on the journey for a little bit and I'd kind of seen experiences of my friends and relatives, I realized when you find someone who has great deen, great character, and is a good match for you. And for everybody, that's going to be different. I can't tell you who that is, but for me, I kind of knew from the signs that, okay, you know what, this is a good person for me, inshallah. You have to take a bit of leap of faith. You have to make dua. I did istikhara, and we just decided to get married during December break. So we got married. And then when I came back, I went back to law school, finished my final term, graduated, and then I came back and I moved to Toronto, and we live in Toronto now, alhamdulillah. But yeah, for me it was, you find the person, don't delay it, get married. So it was a
Wow.
pretty simple story.
MashaAllah, look how romantic is that? In law school, that's a power couple right there. I don't want to mess with either one. How nice is that? MashaAllah. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Sure, as we unravel little bits and pieces throughout your journey
For
to
sure.
inshallah benefit the other sisters as well and brothers to
Absolutely.
take away from that. That's awesome. Thank you. And now, Brother Taha, I know your story kind of has a unique ending, but if you can kindly share your experience, like with the whole process of marriage, like how did if you can kindly share that for the viewers to benefit as well.
Definitely. I'll keep it brief. So in my case, since I'm not married, I was blessed to be fortunate enough to be doing something for a living that I enjoyed. So my journey kind of started off with being, uh, in a position where I had to travel a lot. So I was really enjoying what I was doing, but slowly I started seeing my friends getting married, and all my close friends, one after another, going to their halal bachelor, where we would go from one city to another just to try out all the different, halal restaurants and come back and then, get one of my friend married away. And bit by bit, all of them start, just getting busy with their married life. And then lo and behold, the last one left. So from that, I realized that in life, because Quran says we create, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala create us in pairs, start dawning upon me that what's missing in my life is that significant other, that the second half. So in my case it was a little different. So the learning that I took away from it is I got introduced to a sister at a masjid, and it was a good one of the events that I was basically co-leading through a friend of mine who knew that I was looking. And we went the traditional route where, sister and I kept the conversations to the point. We checked all the boxes of, the deen, the akhlaq, the family, the values, what kind of father would I be? What kind of mother would you be? Etc. So all those things were great. So some of the key conversations that we had discussed in the start, and I would tell everyone to be mindful of it. There are certain boundaries that you want to create that you're comfortable in, that little bubble of comfort that you have created for yourself, and you want to invite the other person into as well. Because marriage is a two-way road. You don't have to be married to know that. It's just, conversations is integral to everything. So parents met, I met her with her siblings, my siblings met her siblings, everything was great. Towards the very end, all of a sudden I got a curveball. So it was our living accommodation. So she was doing part-time. I was working full-time for like about 7 years. She was living a little north of Vaughan. I was living in Saga. And what I had told her that is, I'm going to be buying a house. I'm going to be moving to Milton. It's so far. Is that okay with you? So I wanted to make sure that I wasn't changing the sisters. I have a sister myself, and Islam tells us a lot about the value of women, and you have to ensure that they're protected from the get-go, just the way you carry yourself. So I wanted to make sure I built that level of comfort and presented that from the get-go. So towards the end of it, sister talked to some of her friends and other people, kind of fell into this analysis paralysis, and eventually asked if I could change that aspect of our living accommodations towards the end. So in essence, it comes down to, you have to understand what are your deal breakers, what are you both comfortable with. Because what happens is when I went and I asked my elders, because we always go back to our elders, they know a lot more than us. A common misconception is I know everything. It's not true. There's a reason why we have our elders to go and refer back to. So what they had told me is something that you're not comfortable with right now, something that you have built up to, and are important parts of your life, and you've discussed that and you agreed upon. So when these are agreed upon from the get-go and they're changing towards the end, it's kind of a red flag that you should be, the other person may not know this, but if you find out about it, have that conversation. So the gist of that was, we ended it on a good note. That's another point of it. Anytime something doesn't go according to plan, at least in my end, was I was a little upset because, everything worked out, everything is there, parents are involved, you've kind of got them involved. Don't get upset. Don't bring emotions into play. When you disagree with someone, if someone disagrees with you, don't get mad, don't get emotional, get curious. I wanted to know why she was, coming
Right.
across that. So in the end, it was pretty much leaving her on a good note, and alhamdulillah.
MashaAllah. Jazakallah khairan, brother Taha. So I guess so far what for viewers to take a look at is for Sister Maria, she's kind of crossed that finish line. She's gotten the opportunity, mashallah, to find that special someone, and she's had that process. For brother Taha, on the other hand, mashallah, he's representing those who are on the way, on the verge, who are looking. And so if you're one of those two, let's say you're looking, you're a brother or a sister who's looking. Again, brother Taha, mashallah, you ended on good terms, you say, and throughout that process, we'll pick up some gems along the way. So I really appreciate you sharing that. But let's go back to Sister Maria for a moment. Now let's open the floor a bit broader. When you look at the average Muslim youth today, in your estimation, let's say from a sister's perspective, what do you think the average Muslim youth, how do they look at marriage in general today in 2020, in the 21st century? How do they look at it?
Well, I don't want to speak on behalf of all sisters, but I can say because I did used to have this conversation when I was an undergrad before I was married. Used to come up a lot amongst friends and even relatives, cousins and stuff. You can have two very different perspectives. Like there's no one. I wouldn't say there's one general trend, but maybe you can say that there's two streams of people. So there's one group of sisters, again, speaking for the sisters, because I don't know about what's happening on the brother side, but speaking for the sisters, there's a group of young women who are eager to get married because they recognize that they want a partner in life. They, for various reasons, people want to get married for different reasons, but the ones that I knew, wanted that partner who will bring them closer to God, who will help them strengthen their iman, who they can have fun with as well, like a partner in crime kind of thing, a best friend. People wanted to have a halal relationship. So you have those people who are very eager and want to, but unfortunately, either the system or the way in which we approach the marriage process is working against them. And so they're very frustrated, but they're still going at it. They're still, trying hard, trying to find that partner. And then you have another stream of people who don't want to have anything to do with marriage. They don't want to get married. And again, I'm talking from the sister's point of view. They don't want to get married. They don't want to hear the word marriage. It's a trigger word, if you will. And I mean, I don't want to say I was like that at one point, but maybe my parents would have a different opinion. So, the reason is they do have valid reasons. It's the way society builds up this idea of marriage, like the Muslim community, the way we talk about it as well. They have issues with gender roles. They're like, oh, I'm the woman. I'm going to be the woman in the relationship. I won't be able to have a career, or I want to be able to explore life and travel. I want to have fun on my own. I want to have fun with my friends, before I get tied down and I have to, be a servant to some guy or whatever. These aren't my words. Again, this is just what I've heard, right? So it's this idea that and kind of actually what you said, Brother Muhammad, sorry to, go off of what you were saying when you said that I've kind of crossed the finish line, like I've, ended kind of a journey. I actually see it as the beginning of a journey. So I got married, alhamdulillah, and I have been married for 2 years. But for me, it's like, this is a whole new world. There's so much to learn every single day. And, my spouse and I are working very hard together to make our marriage work. And inshallah, hopefully we'll be married for a long time. And then 50 years down the road, we can look back and say, yes, now we've kind of crossed the finish line. But I think that's what it is some girls really look at it as marriage is the end. And so they're like, I want to do so much before I get there. So yeah, I kind of, sorry to go off on, on kind of on a tangent there, but I kind of see two camps. A group of girls who really want to get married but are not finding what they're looking for, and a group of girls or young women who don't want to have anything to do with it because they see themselves as independent women who want to pursue their dreams. And so don't talk to me about marriage.
I want to build off on that point afterwards, like that mention that struggle between career versus, like, this is going to be a big, I want to get back to that, but Brother Taha, from your side, from the brother side, what's going on? How do guys look at marriage these days? Is it, I'll leave it to you to answer that question. What do you think in general, average, like in your estimation, based on your experience, what you've seen, how do guys look at marriage?
So that's subhanallah. That's so beautifully put. It puts me at lost of words, but I'll try my best to add on top of that. So I was thinking, like, as sister was responding to that. It's okay. I'll give a metaphor. So the general trend I see with the youth, being one self is dating. It's kind of like looked at halal dating, right? Men is like halal dating, and then you kind of try to justify halal dating within the realm of Islam. And it's like, what is it? So if you really want to understand what halal dating is for the younger audience, is halal dating is the best way I can say is think of you walking on the edge of Burj Khalifa while blindfolded, juggling bunnies, and trying to battle all the elements. That's a disaster waiting to happen. That's what halal dating would be. That's a general trend, because if you perceive something in the wrong way and you actually get into it, you're going to be disappointed. And then you say, well, okay, well, how would you look at marriage then? I'd say look at marriage in a way as if you're trying to become a pilot. It takes a lot of time. It's a lot of responsibilities. You really have to be a capable individual. You have to assess all the different factors that go into it. And once you do become a pilot, subhanAllah, you can travel the world in peace with your significant other, but not just that. You can carry family or families because you are that capable individual. So it's like you have to start with why. So it's a book I'm actually going to recommend by Simon Sinek. It's called Start With Why. It's a really good book. I know we're talking about marriage, and you say, well, why does that come about? You have to start with the why, right? Your perception towards what you're actually going into it. So when you look at that and you understand something for what it actually is, it changes your perspective. So the other second point I actually want to bring up, it was beautiful because I've heard this so much, is marriage is like the end, right? I don't want to talk about that. So I'm actually going to take this back to the beginning of time. What is the oldest relationship in the world? Is it mother and son? Is it father and son? Like, some religions might say it was a father and son. It's not. It's the husband and wife. That is the older relationship in the world. Was, Hazrat Adam and Hawa, like Adam and Eve. That's the oldest relationship. So it's actually the beginning of everything, not the end. So I'll leave it to that.
SubhanAllah, look at that, man. Like, there you go. I guess that puts things into perspective. And speaking of like halal dating, I can't tell you. I don't know about you both, but I can't tell you how many times that shows up on my newsfeed, unannounced, right? Like, people are using like these halal pickup lines and stuff of that nature. I mean, just the other day, this is not mine, so just throwing it out there to see kind of what's going on with the youth. I mean, God knows what's going on in the heads. One person was saying, I'll treat your heart like I treat my wudu. I'll never break it. And I was like, this kind of like, you see, look at the Sultan. I was like, oh man, like, what I mean? Like, people, so there are two people that are like, and other people are like, I'm gonna take notes on this. So so maybe it's not like that serious. Start with what? Look at that. So you got to put things into perspective. So, all right, well, there you go. Like with this trend or this look down the line, it's almost like you're going from 0 to 100, right? Like where you're not married, all of a sudden you're at the altar. So it's different. So now going back to Sister Maria's point about career, and especially for sisters, I think this is something that is worth discussing at least for a little while. Is that nowadays we're in the 21st century. In Canada, at least, a single income household is not going to work. Like one household can't be run on a single income. And by tradition, I mean, let's say go back 50 years even, or 100 years, your parents or your great grandparents, they operate on the principle of the man or the male being the breadwinner, and there's a stay-at-home mom and stay-at-home wife. These days, let's say the roles are reversed, or let's say you have a sister who's saying, I want to pursue my career and ambitions. Sister Maria, just based on maybe your friends or people that you know, or just maybe personal experience, how viable is it? Is it possible for a sister to pursue their full-time career aspirations while maintaining a family at the same time? Is this a juggling act? Or, I mean, how do you offer a perspective on that?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair. That's definitely something that's on a lot of people's minds whenever I talk to young women who, like myself, actually, I got married during law school, for example, and I, have every intention, inshallah, to pursue a career. And I think that it's definitely something that a lot of women struggle with. I don't know that there is any one answer to this. I think that the main thing is whoever, like if we're talking about people who are talking to each other for the purpose of marriage and they're communicating about all kinds of important topics that are important to them, the main thing is to talk about this, is don't kind of leave it hanging. See what the other person's perspective is on this. Don't go into a marriage assuming that you know what the other person is thinking about this topic. Don't ever assume anything.
Oh yeah.
Definitely talk about the big things. The other thing is, alhamdulillah, like our religion is flexible. There are certain things, certain obligations that are required of a husband. There are certain obligations that are required of a wife. But within the realm of Islam, we've seen a lot of examples historically that show that a woman can work and can also manage a household and can take care of her kids. A husband can work and also be involved in the household and take care of his kids. It's not so clear cut as, and when you say traditional, like 50 years ago versus modern, I would say if you look at the tradition in Islamic history, it's not the same as tradition in, I don't know, I don't want to say like quote unquote kind of Western history.
Right.
Muslim women were involved in the workforce. So if you go back to the example of Khadija radiallahu anha, like the first wife of the Prophet sallallahu, she was a businesswoman, right? She had kids. So we don't even have to look at the last 50 years. We can look back hundreds of years and have examples of that. The main thing though is the two people who are married or the two people who are getting married really need to be on the same page, because some people prefer certain things. They would like to have a wife who is going to be the primary caregiver for their children. And you brought up Canada. You brought up, modern day Canada, very hard to survive with one income. Some people do it, but it is challenging. And that's true. It is challenging. And so if the two people are on the same page before getting married, that look, I really am actually looking for someone who's going to primarily take care of my children because I don't want to have a nanny, I don't want to have a babysitter, none of that stuff. In fact, I want my kids to be homeschooled. That's all stuff that has to be talked about beforehand. And I'm of the opinion that people are allowed to have their wants. Like you can, want to have a wife who prefers to stay at home. And I'm a woman. I'm saying this as a woman, like I think men are allowed to. But if they don't communicate that beforehand and then they get married and then a child comes along and they're expecting their wife to stay at home for the rest of her life, even though she was career driven, that's not fair. That's not right.
Right.
I think either perspective is fine. There's nothing wrong with either perspective. It's just about communication beforehand and remembering that Islam has that flexibility. That's the thing. When people kind of force obligations on certain genders and say that, no, you must da da da, that's where we have problems.
That's where you draw the line. And we're going to talk about Islamic culture. That's going to be another kind of segment down the line here. But Brother Taha as well, like let's say from a brother's perspective, let's say someone still carries that mindset of I got to be the breadwinner. I got to be the one who puts a roof over people's heads. I got to be the one that, put clothes on people's backs. And let's say you have that conversation. Are a lot of guys still into that, or are they more flexible with it? Like, in your opinion, as someone who's working right now, what have, I mean, based on your experience and what you've seen in your inner circle, how have you, where is the direction going in terms of this conversation? Are the guys still trying to say, I got to bring home the cheddar, or is it a different conversation altogether?
Honestly, I don't think much has changed from the time when I was in high school to when I got to university, to my Islamic circles, to my working circles. One of my close friends, who happens to be one of my sports chiropractor, he's not a Muslim. He's a Christian gentleman. He's been in the industry for quite some time, and he has a very traditional perspective. He's like, I make more money than my wife. I want to go home. I want to make sure my wife has food ready. And he says it out. I don't respond back. I just listen because I'm there just to get my back cracked. But I listen to that, and I listen to his question, because sometimes they're just rambling. Something's going on, and they just want to vent out. And you build that relation with them. So you're like, okay, I'm here just to listen. And then you go like, well, is that supposed to be maybe that traditional quote unquote Muslim guys thing? So it just really comes down to what is the environment the person is growing up with? I think it's very important that we understand that we live in a very fast-paced, changing environment. We have to take it on a case by case. You can't be very steadfast. Like if you would ask me, I'd give that, and I hear this a lot, even from people that I have worked with in the past couple of years, and even now, some of them. My advice to them is go read some poetry. Go read to Maulana Rumi. Go read any other modern day poetry. What that does is poetry helps your mind become nimble, and you need to have a nimble mind in just about everything, especially marriage. You are going to come across things that are not going to conform to that norm that you grew up with or that mindset that you have. What do you do in that particular case? It's like the change management that comes. It's not just a management thing, it's a real world thing. How do you manage to change when it comes about? So if I was to like sum it up, I'd basically say, let's review what are our needs. Sure, sister said, we need to know what our wants are and we have the right, but what are our needs? What do we need to enjoy life? And from there, it's how do we define what is this little subset of things that we need to enjoy our life? Once we figure that out, Islam is a flexible religion. Like we can like beat this topic to death. So it's flexible. So you need to start asking key questions, right? What do we really need to make sure that our marriage is going to be successful? How much money do we need? What kind of lifestyle do we need? What is happiness for us? Let's define that. And once you have that defined, everything around that, you have that baseline, everything around that is just nice to have. It just makes things easier. Both people on the same page, that's all you need.
That's all you need. So just start with the needs and then build yourself up to the wants. And, like it's all about having those difficult conversations beforehand. A lot of
Exactly.
people are probably scared or, trying to shy away from the finances. I mean, getting down to the nitty gritty of, who's taking care of who. So, mashallah, it's a good point. Now, I think another part that stems from all this whole confusion or this whole resistance or this whole source of agony is this clash, this seeming clash between Islam versus culture. You may have heard this over and over again. There are some Islamic practices. You go to the deen, you read the hadith, you look at the Quran, you try to understand it in the best possible way through the authentic teachings, but at the same time, through different cultures all across the globe, they kind of they put the culture on top of the deen, right? So the deen is taking a back seat. So Sister Maria, could you give an example of where this practice can manifest itself in terms of marriage for women, and what are some ways that we could navigate through these tough times?
So then, just to clarify, do you mean if someone catches themselves in a difficult situation where culture and deen clash?
Yeah. So
Okay.
so that's one. Yeah, that's one way to look at it. Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, I was just wondering.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely challenging. It again, it helps to know, like Brother Taha said, it's like being on the same page as the other person. So if you can understand, like for example, if culture in the other person's life plays a very big role, but it doesn't play a very big role in your life, and you know that going into the marriage, you have to be mindful of that. You have to recognize that exactly like Brother Taha said, they've been raised in a different way than you. Um, and I don't think it matters like whether you marry in the same culture or you marry in a culture that's completely different. Everyone's household culture at the end is different. So you could be marrying like Abdullah down the street who you've grown up next to and who went to the same school as you, and your families are very close and everything, but that family's culture and your family's culture are going to be different. So you have to learn how to work with that. And again, this is all solved by having conversations before you get married. So if you ask, what is the importance of culture in your life? First of all, if they're from the same culture as you can clarify whether or not they're from a different subculture. So like within a certain community, like my background is Pakistani Indian. Some people assume that, oh, okay, all Pakistanis are the same. They're not. They, practice culture in different ways. They have different takes on food, on dress, cultural practices. Some people do certain things, other people don't. So definitely having that conversation about how important is culture to you. And if you're marrying someone from a different cultural background, then of course, doing your homework and having conversations with them and their family to see how important culture is. I personally think that as long as culture is not crossing the boundary of deen, which it doesn't always do. Like in some cases it does, but it doesn't always do that. You don't have, practices or rituals that are necessarily, against deen. They're just things that have been from that land for years, like for hundreds of years, and it's not a problem. As long as you're not crossing the boundary of deen, I don't see a problem with that. If it makes people happy and it keeps the peace, a lot of the times, you look at one perspective and you're like, I want to do things my way, and this is the way I've done things always. But again, marriage is about two people coming together. So you have to work with the other person to decide, what am I going to implement, what am I not going to implement. You asked for a specific example, and I'm trying to think of one specific one in particular. I guess I don't have one specific cultural practice in particular, but I could talk about like wedding ceremonies in general,
Sure.
because
Why not?
I think that's where they come up a lot. So yeah, I don't have a specific one in general, but
Yeah, no,
when it comes to wedding ceremonies, like particularly, again, my background is Pakistani Indian, so I can't speak to other cultures. And my husband is also of the same background, actually. So I'm married to someone from the same ethnicity. Pakistani weddings have a lot of different rituals embedded in them that have been taken from Indian culture, right? Pakistan is a very young country. So people sometimes get emotional and frustrated around the time the couple is getting married in general. Like, it's a very emotional time for both people, both families. You have to keep that in mind. And sometimes people really want to do certain things. Their family for, I don't know, centuries has been doing this particular ritual, giving a certain type of gift to the bride the day before the wedding or something like that. If there's nothing in Deen that, clearly says, no, you must not do this, I don't see anything wrong with that. But if you take an aspect of the culture that is clearly against something in Deen, then you have a problem. And actually, just while I was talking, sorry, I came up with a specific
Yeah,
example
okay.
related to marriages. Dowry versus mahr. That is a good example, I just realized. And Brother Taha, if you want to expand on this, you can too. Yeah, because I'm talking from the female perspective. I'd love to get Brother Taha's example on the perspective on this as well as the male. Dowry is, if correct me if I'm wrong, was something in the past that the girl's family would give to the guy, right? When the bride and groom got married. Almost like a payoff, like, yes, thank you for taking our daughter away from us and taking all the burdens away, kind of, okay? Mahr is a gift from the groom to the bride. So it's literally the opposite, right? And in certain cultures, dowry is still implemented. And I know for a fact that in, Pakistan, India, there are certain families that still do that. That, in my opinion, in my humble opinion, goes directly against Deen, because mahr is something completely different. It is a gift from the bride, from the groom to the bride, that has been previously agreed upon, right? So it's not supposed to be a burden on the bride's family to, try to get rid of their daughter, and we'll pay you like $5,000 so you take our daughter. And that is a cultural practice, actually, that is still practiced, and it's a problem. So when that happens, I don't know. I think people should be able to put their foot down and talk it out, but delicately, because if this is a custom that the family is used to, has been used to for centuries, like in their family, then you want to walk around it delicately. But if it's going against Deen, you got to stand up for your Deen.
Right. So the Deen is what guides the vote. So, Brother Tal, if you can kindly, briefly summarize, I guess, from a brother's perspective in terms of Islam and culture, just any trends, any patterns that you've noticed and what can we do about this before we move on to discussing, I think, the more preparation part of it, right? Where the youth, as they are watching this, are wondering, hey, how can I equip myself to get ready for it? So if you can tackle the culture question, then we can move on to the whole preparations part of it. I think it'd be worthwhile. So what's your take on this?
So sister already gave my example about the mahr and dowries part. So I guess to go on top of that, I'd say, I mean, this is such an open-ended like topic. We can probably have like 20 episodes just on this alone. But I'll kind of go back and say, from a culture perspective, the importance of women. I just want to like really focus on that, especially for men. It's a man's world. We can do whatever we want. We can get away with whatever we want, and it's a fact. Sadly, it is a fact. But that's why Islam teaches us to respect women so much. So I'll give you a hadith from Rasulullah that comes to mind. It's in Bukhari, when a man asked Rasulullah, who's the most worthy of my companionship? And Rasulullah said, your mother. Then who? Then mother. Then who? Then mother. Then who? Then father. So it's telling you the importance of women, right? So irrespective of culture, you have to understand the importance of women. Once you understand that, then we go to culture, right? Think of culture. The best way I can give you another metaphor is think of a building. A building has a foundation. Foundation has a plumbing, the electrical work, the doors, etc. That does not change. Every single floor, even within the floor, you can have different cultures, different ways of doing things. As long as the foundation is the same, the building stays intact. No matter there's a storm or whatever, the building won't fall apart. So the foundation for us over here is Islam. That's what's constant. As long as you're following Islam, if I tell you from my side, my family, one of my cousins married a Polish lady. Alhamdulillah, they're Muslims, they're working fine. One of my cousins married a Syrian, my aunt, she's Syrian. No, that's working pretty fine. One of my cousins married an Indian, and he's Pakistani Indian. You know, the usual political clash. God knows who they support in cricket. That's another story. They're going fine because when you look at culture and you look at everything that's happening, you have to go back to Islam. Another thing that comes to my mind is it's Surah Al-Hijr, verse 13, goes along the lines of, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created people like different, he made peoples and tribes just so we can get to know one another, right? So we're going back to our deen. And different cultures and whatnot shouldn't be a problem because deen is there, Islam is there. As long as your foundations are right, don't overthink it. You're just making things complicated for yourself.
MashaAllah, bro. I like that analogy of the building, like setting that foundation straight. If it's a shaky foundation, cultures change left and right. Today ripped jeans are cool, tomorrow they're not. And so, but deen is evergreen, right? So subhanAllah, if you base the foundation of your marriage on deen, mashallah, on top of culture, it's a beautiful thing to hear. So that's a nice. There's another analogy that you mentioned before. This is outside of this talk, which I thought was great, which will lead into our next discussion. Is about cars. And sometimes people work on a car, but they don't know how a car works. And I think you can extend that metaphor to marriage. Sometimes people work on a marriage, but they don't really know how a marriage works. So for the last few minutes that we have here together, Sister Maria, if you can, take the lead on this as to, let's say you have a sister here who's watching this. She's maybe in her teenage years, maybe she's university/college, maybe she's in her 20s or up there in her 30s, and she's a youth and she's thinking about her Prince Charming, but she doesn't know what to do. What would you say would be an action plan or preparation plan to really get the ball rolling so that way things can align for her? And then similar to Brother Taha afterwards, like from a guy's perspective, from a brother's side, what can he do? So Sister Maria, what would a sister need to do in order to be adequately prepared, in your opinion?
For sure. So I think actually Brother Taha mentioned this. I can't remember what question he was answering, but that idea that you have to have a purpose for why you're getting married. You have to have that inner reflection. So for anyone who, like if anyone were to ask me for tips about what to do when you're looking for marriage, the first thing is look inwards before you look outwards. Look inwards and ask yourself why you want to get married, why you are getting married, and have that greater purpose in mind. If you're getting married for, I don't know, the kind of small reasons, individual reasons, that's fine. But for the long term, to have a bigger purpose, to have a bigger goal in mind, to step back and see the bigger picture, that's really what's going to keep a marriage going. It's what's going to make a marriage last. Because when you look at that, if you're looking for that, then you automatically are looking for a spouse who is also looking for that perspective as well. And so you have to ask yourself the big questions. It's also unfair to approach someone and ask them a whole bunch of questions about what do you want out of life, and what are your goals, and this and that, and what is your opinion on A, B, and C, when you haven't asked yourself that. So I would say sit down and ask yourself the big questions. And then once you have an answer and once you have a purpose, then start looking. And when you start looking, be open-minded. So you could be, ask your parents to help you out. You could ask friends, family friends. Some people choose the online route, which is perfectly fine. Like there are lots of websites and there are apps that are, Islam certified. Like there'll be a sheikh who, endorses certain websites, and that's perfectly fine in the modern age to meet that way as well, as long as you're following the halal route and certain guidelines and staying appropriate. And when you start looking, make sure that when I said be open-minded, make sure that just as you want someone with certain characteristics and someone with certain behaviors, you are also behaving that way. because it is unfair, again, to ask someone else to be courteous throughout the process and be honest throughout the process and be upfront throughout the process if you yourself are not being honest and upfront and courteous. And then the other thing is, we have a list of what we need and what we want. As Brother Taha mentioned, start with what you need, but you're allowed to have certain things that, I prefer a spouse who has A, B, and C, but don't make that list too long. If that list is very long, it's just going to be a big challenge. And at the end of the day, if you come across someone who has great deen, who is a practicing Muslim, and who views Islam in a similar way to how you view Islam, because nowadays people have different ways of practicing the religion, and we won't get into the nitty-gritty of that. But as long as they practice similarly to how you practice, and if they have great character, they're a good human being who just wants to be a good practicing Muslim, there's very little reason to say no to someone unless there's some other really important requirement for you for a valid reason. Things like, well, he's not 5 inches taller than me, he's 6 inches taller than me. Things like that, those small things, like, yeah, I get they're your list,
Right.
but try to keep that list
hear-
short. And inshallah, it'll work out.
You don't want a laundry list. You don't want a laundry list. You want like a grocery list, I suppose. So that's amazing. Khair, you gotta keep it as succinct as possible. So, Brother Taha, what about you? Take this home. What are some things for the boys, for the brothers? Like, how do you adequately prepare yourself as you're going through this process? What you've learned, and what are some things as, inshallah, hopefully, once we get to that stage, what are some things that we could proactively do, practically speaking, in order to make this process smooth?
So just to build on that, what sister said is, when we're asking about what is the purpose of marriage? Why are you getting married? Take a step back. What is the purpose of life? Let's start with that. So I tell the brothers, think about that. What is the purpose of life? Because you're basically asking the right questions, right? It's like the circle of life. Everything started from the oldest relation, which was between a man and a woman, and basically what Islam teaches. Islam teaches it's to preserve the religion through procreation in the end of the day, right? But it allows us to have that intimate relationship with this close person that becomes our second half. Now, building on that, you're looking for that second half that's going to complete your deen. But before you do that, you have to take care of yourself. That half of yours that you own, did you take care of that? When you present that half to the other person to complete your deen, what's that state of that half? Is it like a quarter? Is it not even a quarter? It's are you faking it till you make it? Because that approach may work somewhere else, but it doesn't work with marriage. You have to ensure that you've done your due diligence before you go forward. So the last point I want to add on that is, there's a common misconception. You will find your second half, and that second half is going to complete your deen. That's not how it works. What you really need to understand, because this dawned upon me when I brought this up and I asked the Sheikh this question, and said, listen, you don't complete your deen when you find your second half. Your deen is completed when you are a pious person and your pious half meets another pious half. When these two pious people meet, that's when your deen is completed. That's the reason why it is so important to take care of yourself, work on yourself, read the Seerah of Rasulullah, do that, the translation of the Quran, understand what Islam really tells you, because what's going to happen is you'll be a father one day, you'll be a mother one day. You will have far greater responsibilities than just, I'm going to have this partner in crime, I'm going to go travel the world, I'm going to enjoy my life. You have to understand that you are in the process of creating the legacy for tomorrow, the future for tomorrow. And these people, once you're gone, are going to continue spreading the deen of Islam. So what are you doing? It's a great commitment that you're about to make. So don't take it lightly. Enjoy it.
MashaAllah, I gotta say, SubhanAllah, marriage is much bigger than just, finding another significant other. I think it speaks to, I've heard it been put like this as well, that some people say, there's 50%, and then your significant other is 50%, you become 100%. But the fact of the matter is, speaking to what you're saying, you need to be 100% to find someone else who's 100%, and then you two be together. You don't need to find someone to fill in the holes and to complete part of what it is. So other people can't give what they don't have. And so if you're searching for someone and trying to fill that hole in your soul, then you're never going to get that filled. So mashallah, man, this was a truly amazing, enlightening conversation, but it's unfortunate. All good things must come to an end. But I want to thank Sister Maria and Brother Taha, both of you, for your insight in this conversation. You see, with these unique vantage points, you can hear about marriage through different means, through different mashayikh, through different things, and they have their place. But it's always nice to hear from the youth themselves, one who is married and one who's on the verge of getting married and in the process, and you can see yourself in either one of those. And may Allah subhanahu reward you both and continue to do wonderful, wonderful things. Have long, happy, blessed marriages and relationships. Again, true thank you to both of you, Sister Maria and Brother Taha. And so to conclude for today, I just wanted to say thank you both, and thank everyone. Thank the team of Muslim Network TV. Tune in next week, every Wednesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm your host, Muhammad Maxwell Hassan, and for all those, strong, stay safe, and stay proud of being Muslims. Barakallahu feekum, jazakumullah khairan, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.